Hey, Stephen down here doing the junkyard crawl at Bernardston Auto Wrecking with a sad early B-body Mopar. Is it a convertible? Well, yes, but no. It's been decapitated, but we know it's not a factory convertible because we see the rear speaker tray. If this was a real convertible, there would be a big old void here for the top stack to fold down into. So this is a 1964 Plymouth Belvedere two-door hardtop. Now the hardtop on this has been sliced off, but the hardtop was actually available on the Belvedere and the Fury and the Sport Fury lines, whereas the base Savoy was strictly a two-door pillar coupe or sedan. So again, this was a two-door hardtop that somebody sliced the roof off of and the corners, but it also gives us a nice X-ray view of the inner workings of an early B-body. Now the B-body arrived in 1962 in Dodge and Plymouth land, and the styling was weird, so they didn't sell very well. About 339,000 were sold. By contrast, by 64, more conservative styling, sales doubled to 549,000 of 1964 Plymouth. So again, the conservative styling went a long way toward improving sales for Plymouth and Dodge. Now we look at this here, the trunk is gone. We can see the trunk mat is still in position, this plaid trunk mat underneath all this debris. Here it is right here. This is the original trunk mat, and it survived a lot better than the trunk floor did, which now has that Massachusetts cutaway view thanks to Mother Nature and oxidization. Now the rear axle on this, we know it's a 64 because of the two-piece axle shaft, and here it is, the dreaded nut and cotter pin. Trouble is, if you got to get the brake drum off on this, at least original stuff, you had to remove this with a pulling tool. This has an aftermarket, or it did, a drum that slips on. That was a fix-it thing that arrived very shortly thereafter. But if you want to pull these things apart, you have to take this cotter pin out, the nut off, and then use a pulling tool. It's not much fun. This went away in 65 to a one-piece axle with sort of a cupped look. But here's the inner structure of the unit body. These are not body on frame. That was kind of the thing about these. Made them lighter, less rattles and squeaks as a fully welded unitized construction car. The inner workings of the rear window winder go up, go down, or it is right there. The quarter panel skin here, somebody unceremoniously sliced that away, and sad. This was probably done back when this was just a useless, who cares car. Now two-door hardtops like this are fodder for two-door sedan conversions, but that's a whole other thing. Here's the passenger side front door again with the window winder. Power windows were an option on these cars, but again, this was a manual window car. Now we look inside of this one and we see the bench front seat. There it is. Push button transmission to the left of the steering wheel, and that's pretty much foolproof stuff. That's a cable that pushes and pulls on a cable that then actuates the rooster comb in the valve body. Here's the tail shaft of the 904 transmission right there, again courtesy of Mother Nature, the factory cutaway look. Now these buttons here, these are for the heater. Now these are vacuum controlled, believe it or not. You push these buttons in, and little vacuum motors operated by engine vacuum operate ducts inside of the cowl. Now the original radio on this thing, look at that, the radio plate. This might have been a Radio Delete car, hard to say. This is the factory surround bezel. This has not been sliced or diced. This might have had a delete plate, and I don't see signs of any kind of washers or screw here. This might have been a Radio Delete car, so kind of an unusual little piece right there. And the polar opposite of this thing here is in Motor Trend, January of 1964. Road testing the hot 64 Plymouth Fury right there. And this, of course, is not a race Hemi, but rather the Street Wedge. What a great story that is, or magazine article. Right there. How cool is that? Plymouth Sport Fury Road Test. And this one was a 426 Street Wedge. You could still get the Max Wedge in 1964 and the Race Hemi. But again, this is the 365 horsepower Street Wedge. And this is an old Motor Trend test of the car. Just great pictures right there. And there it is. This one didn't have a pause. You can see that shot of the right rear tire smoking with the test wheel behind it. So no pause here, no sure grip, I should say. It's a 4-speed car. And there it is, skidding to a stop right there at the underside of the 426 Street Wedge. Bucket seats on the Sport Fury. And again, this is the polar opposite of the car we have before us now. And again, under the hood, speaking of polar opposites, here it is, the Leaning Tower of Power. Now that's an affectionate term. They're really not that potent, but this is the 225 Slant Six. Now, there was also a 170 cubic inch Slant Six, which was never installed in B bodies. This 170 was a tiny little thing, only used in A bodies, the Valiant, the Dart. And they call it the Slant Six because, well, the engine lays over at a 30-degree angle that way. That's why the valve cover is not centered like it would be on a Ford or a Chevy or any other American car. And the whole point of the slanted orientation was to have a lower engine height for a lower cowl and better styling. And also it allowed an opening for a ram-tuned intake manifold. Instead of a straight-up deal with a carburetor screwed to the side of the head, Chrysler utilized this ram-tuned candelabra-style intake manifold that was very effective. 145 horsepower. And again, this one had the manual drum brakes with a single pot master cylinder right here. You can see it right there, the single circuit. That was something that lasted through 1966. 67 dual circuits arrived. This was also a power steering car. It's kind of weird. There's the power steering pump right there, or the box. And I got to say that the draw of that pump on this 195 horsepower Slant Six, you know, probably a good 10 horsepower right there. Who needs to lose 10% of your horsepower, or, you know, 5% when you're trying to steer the car? But very original in many ways, the original 10 metallic paint. And the front bumper's pretty decent on this thing. A lot of guys would pay dearly for that. The grille, sadly, has been munched pretty bad. Now, believe it or not, these are so rare and they're not being reproduced that there are people who actually can warm and gently reform these things and bring them back and then anodize them again, and are about as good as new. And here's the headlight surround for the, I believe, the driver's side right here, and it's in pretty darn good shape. Now, in 1964, that Race Hemi Savoys had single headlight grilles, and believe it or not, this grill piece right here, if you're building a single headlight replica, you need this. You'd trim it up and you would then section this in and cover over the inboard high beams for a Race Hemi tribute or replica. And these are raw bits right here that will kind of take what we can get here in the year 2022, because this stuff ain't being reproduced. So it's kind of right here. It's Bernstein Auto Wrecking, call them if you care. Now up front, the drum brakes on this are 10 inchers. And here we can see, there it is. Now 11-inch drums were possible on the 383 and 426 cars, or a Slant Six with trailer towing, believe it or not. That's a 10-inch drum, not a bad thing at all. The upper control arm with the aircraft-style telescoping shock absorber. No front sway bar on this one. Again, that would be part of the trailer towing package, which I have seen on Slant Six cars. But here we have the front wheel opening sliced out of this beautiful 64 Plymouth fender. Kind of a sad thing to see this. It looks to me like it's an in-process altered wheelbase car. That's how I think. But the reality is somebody probably sliced this thing out of here back in the 80s and, you know, welded it on to another car, covered it with Bondo, and hit the road again. And it is sad that this is a two-door hardtop. Again, one of not many made in 1964. And again, these were $2,431. In other words, about $85 more than a Belvedere two-door sedan. And these were made, about 66,000 of these hardtops were made, and about 26,000 two-door sedans were made. So, and the sedans are the ones that people want, because those are the ones that they base many of the Max Wedge aluminum cars and Race Hemis on. So two-door sedan 64 Plymouths are worth their weight in gold. And that's why two-door hardtops, like what this used to be, are great donor cars. But I'm afraid this one here, it's conforming to the landscape. The roof's gone. It's basically like a carpet laying out over the soil here at Bernstein. So I think this car's days are over, but there's still good stuff on it. I mean, the instrument panel, that grille, a lot of these things. So nothing goes to waste at Bernstein Auto Wrecking. If you want to learn more about this car, just give them a call. Bernstein Auto Wrecking. Ask for Dale and see what you can do. Oh, before we say goodbye, remember that you don't want to drink and drive, kids, but one thing that's kind of interesting, this here is a Massachusetts refund. Way back when the nickel refund came along, they actually imprinted these cans with black ink to remind you, don't throw that away, that's a nickel. And I used to go to rock concerts and stuff and grab up at the Worcester Centrum all the empties outside of the place and cash them in 10, 20 bucks. But there's one right there, there's a nickel right there. So I'm going to double the value of this car. There you go, it's worth 10 cents now. Anyway, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the Steve Maggs YouTube channel. There's plenty more where this came from.